Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your rapt attention. This kind of feels a little bit like the prime example of imposter syndrome, me standing in front of a room of damn professionals. But what I thought I'd talk to you about today is my new role at Slimming World. I joined the company a year ago as the Group Publishing Systems Manager. So I had a history and experience of working with asset management systems and workflow systems, and was going to an organisation that realised that they needed something like that, but they weren't exactly sure what or why or how. And a year in, I can talk a little bit about where we've got to. So for those that are not aware, Slimming World, it's an amazing organisation. It's the country's leading and most successful weight loss organisation, and something that I'm having to be more aware of as I get older and my metabolism changes. But there are almost 1 million members with thousands of groups across the country. So it's a massive, huge member organisation, really successful. And we also publish a magazine with the aim of supporting and inspiring the members on their weight loss journeys. And that magazine has become the third most actively purchased magazine in the country, behind, I think, the Radio Times and one other TV listings magazine. So a kind of an amazing reach and 50 years of growth. We're approaching our 50th anniversary next year. And the head office is based in Derbyshire, just off a junction of the M1. So their growth from the beginnings in a scout hut in a nearby village to where we are today has led to hundreds of people working in a head office that have built up systems and processes over time, and departments that have grown and expanded over time to take on more and more tasks. And they realised that they needed something to start to tie all these things together. And that's how I'm here that's how I am here speaking to you today. So I'm going to talk about the journey from no dam through the initial dam, and then also to talk about what I think comes next, because one of the very early conversations that we had at Slimming World was, dam's just an image library, right? And hopefully by the end of this presentation, if that's also of your mindset, that I can expand that out a little bit more, because I don't think that dam is just for pictures, and my terrible pun on dogs are for life and not just for Christmas has led to this title. I should get subs working with me on this. So when I talk internally about dam, I'm starting to use a different term, and this isn't the right term yet either. It's certainly not a very Slimming World term, the enterprise platform. But for me, this kind of encapsulates what we're trying to get to from a system of disparate file server and Excel spreadsheet based systems, where we have one system that encapsulates all of our creative data that we're creating, all of the business knowledge, all in one place, the single source of truth. By the end of my implementation, if it ever ends, I want everybody in the company to be using my system. And I want them to be using it in a way that's controlled by permission sets, access rights, with the ultimate aim of promoting communication between departments, collaboration between those departments, and a much more efficient consumption of assets, because we have many different teams creating many different types of assets across different, with different outputs, and there's a lot of duplication. But when I first started talking about this, and before the role really started, talking about an enterprise platform that contains all of the data for the entire business forever and ever is something that isn't met with rapturous open arms, as you can quite imagine. So how am I doing this at Slimming World? I'm starting small and building up. And the ultimate approach, every conversation that I have, is about allowing our creative teams to do what they do best, which is to create and be creative. And to do that, implementing small, deliverable parts of the system so that it builds up to that big vision picture that's in my head without alienating people on the way, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the kind of the Spotify model of how they built their platform, and they described it in a way that kind of made so much sense to me, and that you don't start to build a car by building 4 wheels and then finding some windscreens and then bolting some doors on. First of all, you build a scooter, and then you turn the scooter into a push bike, and then you turn the push bike into a motorbike, and then you turn the motorbike into a car. And that's the approach that we're taking, with the ultimate aim of the enterprise platform at Slimming World. So the first step is that we embrace the existing teams and processes and bring those that are the most appropriate into the DAM. And at Slimming World, it was really obvious that there were many different teams interacting with our assets that we were creating in ways that had just built up over time, and as I say, were really inefficient. We have a magazine team that are creating issues worth of content with imagery and articles and PDFs. And then what would happen at the end of an issue, we would get all of that data back from our repro house and put it on a server. And because the different teams have different servers, because that's how IT work, if you have a team, you have a server. And what would happen is that we would take a copy of that data and then put it on another server. And then another team would enhance and add keywords to the information that was in there. They would do that in Bridge, and it's kind of the prototype of the DAM. But then no one else could see that data, so only those teams could see what was being done to it. And you would also be in a situation where the teams that were wanting to find that information would be kind of paging through old copies of the magazines, or they would speak to the person who knew that we did a feature about a chicken recipe 2 issues ago and kind of have the pictures for it. So there's lots of communication, and communication is not a bad thing. I should state that at the outset. I don't ever want to stop people talking, but we needed to make it more efficient. And the second step to that was, when they did find the image, they needed a different version of it. They needed a version that could go on social media. They needed a small copy. They needed a high res that they could send to a national newspaper to be featured in an article. So copy 1 of data, copy 2 of enhanced data, 3 different people having different requirements for that data. It was really obvious that an image library is the place to start. And going back to the start of this conversation, image libraries are what people think of as DAMs, probably outside of this room, but that's the initial thought. So we started with an image library. This should be the bread and butter of any DAM system that you implement. And if you find a DAM system that can't do images, I suggest you're probably in the wrong direction. And in this step, it was really important that we made a difference really quickly, created momentum so that people started to understand the benefits of the DAM and build trust in me, because I'm new to the company, the role is new, and people generally don't like systems. That's my experience of 20 years of being in a creative industry. Systems are not our friend. So small changes, big wins. This is the building of the scooter version of the DAM. So we started with an image library. This shouldn't be so revolutionary to anybody in this room, but to the teams that were using it, it was revelatory. The teams themselves are very organised, and there are many, many spreadsheets, and there are many different folder structures that were holding all of this information, but again, not in the most efficient way. This is an example of images with the keyword chicken, just because it was what I was thinking of as I was making my dinner when I was preparing the presentation. And what first blew their mind was that you could have multiple keywords on an image. So if I had an image with chicken and bread, I could have one image with 2 keywords and not 2 copies of the image in 2 separate folders that were then out of sync and different copies. And again, none of this is revolutionary, but if you implement it well and you start small, you build the trust of the teams that you're using. I should have stated at the start of this that I'm a team of 1. So I'm kind of relying on the trust and the goodwill of the teams that I'm working with to build virtual teams to help implement this. So taking all of the files and folders across all of the different servers, importing them, deduplicating, taking the metadata that we've already used, because I think we were talking earlier about not throwing things away because the work that was done was useful, but we just make it available to more people. So the images are also tagged with usage terms, so we know if we're allowed to use them again, and we know if there are any restrictions, and that kind of comes in useful also further. To establish the usefulness of the DAM for all of the different teams that are using it. So we have PR and marketing teams who will go and grab images from file servers and do things with them that they probably weren't allowed because no one could stop them. And now we have a much more kind of collaborative, communicative approach where the images are in there, they're enhanced with metadata, but there's also some control. The next step, and I love this because this was really easy for me, was a PDF archive. And somebody was talking earlier about building the archive of the future. And what we're doing here is a flippable PDF version. And again, this isn't the ultimate end game, but for the teams that were accessing the DAM, being able to go and have a look at an issue from 2 years ago without having to hunt in a folder or look through a binder copy or find some copy on a desk somewhere, to go and actually be able to search for the content, flip through, read the issues, was, again, a quick win that generated trust in the system, made sure it was useful. And a single multi-page PDF in a system like a DAM isn't, again, the most practical and useful use of the DAM because you can't break it down and you can't do anything with it once you found it. But this is the starting point. So people starting to look in the DAM for anything that they need. And then once they're starting to look in it, they start to give me feedback and they start to use it. And then the third quick win was we feature successful members in our magazine as part of the inspiration for people who are looking to lose weight. And these member stories are kind of the two pillars of Slimming World magazine, the inspiration and then the support to do that. And our individual teams are very focused on using those member stories to promote across social media and marketing events and award ceremonies and all things like that. But we never had a way of storing content in a system by featured member. So this step was really important for us because it started to make people think about the DAM as not just for pictures. Although these look like pictures, they're just containers. The assets and the metadata around the person and the member is really important. The story that we store for them is stored with the member. The images that we've published, the images that we haven't published, the images that the members supplied are all in one place. So instead of having multiple teams, again, a research team with information on one side, a magazine team with information that's been published on another, and then a third team that's kind of got a mishmash of some of that, but not all of it. I want everything in. Once everything's in the DAM, everyone looks in the DAM, and then that's when it becomes more useful. I'm starting to kind of use the term DAM is not a file system because people very often think of files and folders when they're organizing their content. But DAM is not a file system means that the images that we used in print are the same images related to the member asset, and they're the same image that might be related to a recipe or a feature story or a social media post. The relationships between the information start to become really important and start to enhance what people think about how they can use the system. So we've taken the scooter and we've added pedals, and the pedals are the members, the PDF archive, and the usage of the system in a way that people haven't been able to kind of consider using an organizational system like this before. So that first step was to embrace, and it's to take some really quick wins, take the content that was being stored and organized, and just make it easier for people to use it. And obviously, a nice, pretty user interface helps with that, but as was mentioned earlier, training is really important, hand-holding, using the system, training up some kind of key people who can help you to evangelize that if you're ever in the situation like I am, where you're doing it on your own. Step 2 is to enhance the DAM, is to take what had been built and make it more useful for more teams. And the approach that I've taken with this, say I was brand new to Slimming World, I didn't understand the corporate structure, didn't understand how the teams were arranged, didn't understand what the products were done. But as you start to explore and get used to the teams and how everything's structured together, you start to very quickly identify those teams that are super organized, those teams that have many spreadsheets, those teams that have really tight folder structures. And what you want to do with those teams is to grab them and instead of Excel DAM, which is DAM by spreadsheet, get them to use your DAM. So what we did for this step was to look at things like commissions and contributors and contracts and assign those to the images. So now we have images that are related to features and are related to a magazine and also might be related to a member, but now we have the contract and the commissioning information attached to those assets. And what that means is that instead of a folder full of paper contracts that have been signed and stored very dutifully away, is that they're now in the system. So again, one place to look, find the image that you want, know if you can use it or not, and also use the DAM to enhance that imagery so that you get the version that you want when you need it. You don't have to use Photoshop to do a conversion. And then once you've done that, you can start to help develop reports about how many images you commissioned with certain rights, how much you've spent on stock photography, how much you've spent on shoots. All of those kinds of things start to become possible. And when you start to have people dragging you to their meetings, instead of me forcing myself into their meetings, you know that you're starting to win. In this step, you need to maintain the momentum of the kind of that early initial step of it's very easy to stop DAM at image library. And there are definite benefits, well, there are obvious benefits to having a DAM system in place for that. But I think that you need to start to think about the next step. And that's where you need to also start to assert your leadership skills and communication skills to talk about DAM as not just an image library. So anytime you see a spreadsheet, think, can it be done in the DAM? Talk to the teams. Find out whether it's worth doing and then start to plan in that process. So it's the big picture broken down into small chunks and implemented. So what we're looking at here at Slimming World is starting to think about reporting widgets on issues and books and projects to think about how we can make information readily available to people so that people again don't have to look in spreadsheets. This enhancement also moves to workflow so that we can start to integrate the content creation process within the DAM instead of just thinking about content storage. One of the things that I am very keen to move on from very quickly is thinking about DAM as the end process of a creative workflow. And that if you can bring your creative workflow into the DAM, then the DAM builds itself. And it saves me having to do uploads and tagging, which is always very useful. It also helps to promote usage, and it helps to make the system feel much more alive than just being an image library. And say, by this stage, the teams are starting to come to me saying, can I use it for this? Can I use it for video? Can I use it to think about competition entries for members? And I say yes, but later. And this is where features that demonstrate really well, where you get an ooh and an ah in your demonstrations within your organization, where you can show assets and how they're related. So one thing to take away from this, I hope that you would take away is that metadata is really important, but relationships are a really key metadata piece as well. How things are related together, so you don't have to necessarily worry about file naming, because I know that those images were associated with that folder, which are associated with that feature. Those things build themselves. So we've taken the initial DAM, we've embraced the users, they enjoy the hug, and now we've extended it. Now we're going to start to extend it. We've taken the storage, we started to think about how we input, and for step 3 is to think about how we use the content that's in the DAM once it's in the DAM. So we've stored, we're thinking about input, and now we're thinking about output. So by this I mean how can we make the usage of all our content easier and more efficient? And we're starting to think about this by articleizing and breaking down our content into chunks. And I talked earlier about how the issues are in the system, but they're not particularly useful because they're just a flat single PDF. What we're doing is to break down those PDFs into individual articles and individual recipes and building up the information in the system so that those things become more useful to both search, find, store and organize, but also output, so that people can start to think about how to create new products, new books, new digital products, newsletters, things like that, with the content that's already in the system. And by having it all linked to those original images and the relationships, the contracts and the commissioning, we know what we can use, we also know whether we should use it, and then we can output it to all those different third-party systems. And the other third kind of leg of my extension is to think about project planning. This isn't kind of a typical use case for a DAM, but in our design teams, they are wanting a way to help to plan and prioritize their work. Instead of having spreadsheets and 4-hour meetings to prioritize those things every week, we're breaking down those projects into assets. So a project is an asset and a task is an asset. And we build up project timelines from here, and people also mark things as done, so things build themselves. Again, we're making these things more efficient by simplifying the reporting and making sure that work is done within the system. And then total world domination. So this is end-to-end asset management, content creation and not just storage, and then simplifying DAM population by integrating the workflow into that process. And why are we doing this? The single source of truth, that's the key thing. One place to look for your assets, one place to find what you need and then to do something with it, to give your teams time to be more creative, to do what they need to do. And in my case, it's to assist the wider business strategy, which is to bring teams together so that we can service our members better. This is what my world domination currently looks like. I've had to blank out the project names, obviously, but that's kind of where we're starting to look. These are all different individual teams who will have an impact into the DAM at some point. And most of them, surprisingly, have said yes so far. So, top tips. I think this is kind of based on my year of being at Slimming World is don't bite off more than you can chew at once. Ensure that your key stakeholders, so whether that's your management team or your kind of immediate manager, is aware that you're thinking about a bigger picture and not just about an image library. As I said at the start, plan for small, quick wins to build confidence in your system and your implementation process. And always make sure that you're consolidating, simplifying, and enhancing both the assets and the work that people are doing. And the embracing is really important. You can't just go in and impose a DAM. People have to demand the DAM from you, and that's kind of the slightly different approach. It's not even different. That's the approach that we're taking at Slimming World. But the most important thing, the very most important thing, is remember that everything takes longer than you think. So manage people's expectations and maybe don't mention world domination. Thank you very much.